And all right, now that the recording's on, let me do that again. I think I'm supposed to start by calling the Board of Canvassers to order. It's 3:04 p.m. on June 17th, 2024. But we not only have a quorum present, we have the entire membership present. And I will call on Boris.
Good afternoon to the board and everyone attending today's meeting. Just like it was the case in any previous elections, today the Board of Canvassers has to review and reject as untimely ballots that we received after the legal deadline to receive ballots for 2024 presidential primary election. Today, the staff has prepared 144 ballots for the Board of Canvassers to reject as untimely. Our review of the received ballots indicates that we have 68 domestic untimely ballots and 76 Yukawa overseas untimely ballots.
Boris, do any of them have postmarks that are within a day or two of election day?
So I didn't rank them by date itself. When it comes to the domestic, there are 57 that were mailed out late and they were by default received late. And there are 10 that are timely mailed, but they were untimely received. That's
I'm sorry, when you say mailed out late, you don't mean after a deadline, you just mean late in the period?
Late after the deadline that we can figure out from the postage. And there are 10 that are timely mailed, but untimely received.
I'm sorry, let's go back because I'm not sure my question is clear.
Okay.
When you say that some of the ones that we have received late were mailed out late, we don't mail out ballots after the deadline for mailing out ballots. So
no, mailed back from the voters to us.
Right. Okay.
That's
okay.
But staff lingo, maybe.
Right, but what I'm trying to understand is, do we have? I know that on some of these, we know from experience in the canvass that some of these will have postmarks, some of them will not have postmarks.
That's good.
And I guess what I'm asking is if you have any sense as to the ones that we've received, kind of what category they're in. I mean, obviously they are late because they had to be received by 10 days after election day, and we're long past that.
So,
but just any indication you have as to their history.
So, two of them were actually put in the mail stream on time. We just got them late, and the others, I can show it to the board. There's nothing on them. So we had to look at the signature page, signature side to determine according to the signed date on the oath, if they were timely sent out or not. Again, this is the best that we can do with the ballots as we receive.
And with what you have, I mean, obviously, again, they're definitely late. We didn't arrive before the 24th of May.
No.
But in general, are the signatures dated before May 14th, or are the signatures after May 14th, or is it a mixture?
So if you bear with me, majority of these are dated before that date there, David.
Okay. Which then, of course, leaves us with, I mean, this is one of the issues we want to discuss with the Postal Service, that without postmarks, we have very little, other than when it arrives. We don't know whether it sat in a post office or whether it sat in somebody's house or what happened, essentially.
Absolutely correct. It's I would say it's a legitimate question to ask and get a bit clarification on this one.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions before I look for a motion? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I will. I move we reject these ballots as being untimely.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Diane, second by Margie. Any further discussion? All right, I'll go.
Mr. President,
Daniel.
I know you uh, talk about having conversation with the post offices. Can we or can Boris and the team determine which post offices we should meet with as opposed to, so at least we have an idea in terms of, is it going to be 2, 3 post offices?
I think what we're planning, Daniel, is all of the Montgomery County postmasters. And because that's the one that we have any hope of influencing, as the ones in Montgomery County. The issue on postmarks, as we've discussed before, is that business reply mail apparently normally does not get postmarked, which is a major problem for election officials. Um, and but the secondary issue that we're going to discuss is the one that we discussed at Canvas, which is how it is actually a problem for us to get postmarks that do not reflect when the ballot was mailed, but reflects when the ballot arrived at the local post office here, because that would just be misleading, because what counts to us is when the ballot was mailed, not when it was received in Montgomery County. So that's what I would figure would be our conversation. We had a similar meeting with the Rockville postmaster after the last election, and to my knowledge, we did not have this issue from the Rockville post office. So our hope is that we will have, I mean, we did not have that issue this election from the Rockville post office. So I'm hoping that we will have similar results by talking to the others. I know that Boris and staff are working on that now.
Yeah, because I'm very uncomfortable in rejecting ballots if the voter did everything. It just happened to be that our system did not work for those votes to get to us on time.
Well, and I'm uncomfortable too, except for, of course, the state law makes very clear that if it wasn't received by 10 days after the election, we have no choice. That does not make it comfortable. That just makes it, determinative of the answer. But the reason for my questions today, and I'm sure for yours, is not because we think that these should be considered timely, but because we'd like to have fewer of them in the future. And this is a continuing issue that we keep trying to find ways to let people know how to avoid this issue, including telling them, that if you want it to be postmarked by election day, go into the post office, don't just hand it to your mailman. Don't just put it in a mailbox, or send it back earlier. Don't wait till the last minute. As Boris's presentation will remind us, despite all of our efforts to tell people not to wait till the last minute, many people do. We're going to do what we can to educate our voters so that there are as few of these as possible. And we will certainly be working with the Postal Service as well, and keeping all of you informed and part of the conversation as well.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, Diane.
Yeah, quickly. I don't know if you know this the answer, or if maybe this will be a question given to the post office when you meet with them, but is the reason that group of mail does not have the timestamp because of the rate that is paid for that kind of mail?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I don't know, Boris, whether you or no, this is really a state issue, as I understand it, in terms of, I believe they're the ones who decide what kind of postage we're using. But
I'm wondering if that level of postage is the reason they don't stamp that class of mail.
I might be wrong on this, but my understanding is that all election mail is business reply the mail in the whole nation. We are not exception here. And I believe what David mentioned earlier, that business reply mail and USPS stamping of that type of mail, it's also USPS nationwide policy. So these are questions to be raised and discussed, but I'm not necessarily sure that we are somehow exempt or specific case in this.
My understanding is that this is a national standard.
Okay.
I do not know whether there's anything that can be done locally to, I mean, obviously we can't locally affect every post office in the country, but we might be able to locally affect the post offices in Montgomery County.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking for a logical reason that they would not stamp that kind of
As I understand the logical reason, it's the type of mail that is being used. And then the question is, can they have a different protocol for election mail, because election mail is labeled election mail.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's an, I mean, that's an issue as well. I'm pretty sure that we would unanimously, if it was up to our board, we would want postmarks. But again, postmarks when things are put in the mail, not when they arrive in Montgomery County, but when they enter the mail stream.
Right.
And we're going to do what we can to find out what the rules are and what we can do about it, and to try and get a system that makes sense. But obviously, I know where you're going with this, Diane. I agree with you. If we're using a type of mail that literally does not provide for postmarks, we should consider using a different type of mail.
Right.
And I agree. Now, of course, it's easy for me to agree without knowing what the costs are.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's see what that entails. But we obviously would much rather have postmark. And in fact, it's not even a question of what we'd rather have. The law relies on postmark.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea. Okay. I believe we had a motion and a second, and we've had some conversation. Does anyone else have anything to say before I call the vote? Okay. Daniel. Daniel is looking for his mute button.
I would, yes.
Okay. Ami.
I vote yes.
Okay. Diane.
Aye.
Keena.
Aye.
Alex.
Aye.
Margie.
Aye.
And I vote aye. It is unanimous. So we are unanimously declaring these ballots untimely and rejecting them, but I will take the liberty of saying that we are unanimously not happy about it. So we will see what we can do to not have as many of these in the future. Okay, I think it is now time to adjourn the Board of Canvassers meeting. So I am now going to call the Board of Elections meeting to order. It is 3:16 p.m. on June 17th. Once again, we not only have a quorum present, we have all the board members present. The first order of business for the board meeting is the board president's remarks, and I do have a few remarks to make today. First, some of you may know that the Board of Education is, as we speak, announcing their choice for a new Montgomery County Public Schools superintendent. I do not know who that is because I'm busy in our meeting. But I'd like to start my comments today by sending get well wishes to my good friend and mentor, Dr. Ed Andrews, who was the Montgomery County Superintendent of Schools a little more than 40 years ago. Ed and his wife, Linda, still live in Montgomery County. I should tell Ami, Diane, and Alex that he's a member of your political party. And as you might imagine, we've had some interesting conversations over the decades. And I wish him a speedy recovery. Second, I would like to take the opportunity to get a jump on tomorrow and wish happy birthday to our board vice president. And since we're not meeting tomorrow, but we are meeting today, I would say that he is still a young man, but we will reevaluate next year. We might have a different conclusion next year.
Let's see how he weathers the general in November.
Yeah. Actually, he might age quite a bit during the course of.
I thought was suggesting that perhaps the canvas might take another decade off of his life, but hopefully that's not what he was suggesting.
No. That's not at all.
I'm going to listen to our board attorney and not say anything.
Yeah, that's you do have a right to remain silent, particularly on the subject of your age. That's definitely the case. And then I would also like to congratulate our former board president, Jim Shalick, for his appointment to the Maryland State Board of Elections. Ami and I reached out to Jim on Thursday to congratulate him and invite him to have coffee with us. And we look forward to working with him in his new capacity. And we're glad that someone we know and like is in that position. When Jim and I served together, which we did for all of his 6 years on the Board of Elections and as president of the board, we worked together on some things and we had our difference on some things, and I'm sure that both will continue. As our board attorney reminded me recently, our board has a long history of working with the state board, but also challenging the state board when we see fit. As the board knows, MoCo 360 called our attention recently to an online video that included some surprising and disappointing comments that Jim made in 2021 to the Maryland Voter Integrity Group about the 2020 general election. Ami and I issued a joint bipartisan statement in response to questions from Ginny Bixby from MoCo 360 that she asked us about his comments. I am not going to rehash the entire disagreement here and now, but I do need to comment on our work in the 2020 election. And by our work, it's obviously not just the board. The board, our hardworking staff, and thousands of Montgomery County election officials worked very hard and put our own health at risk to give county voters a choice of how to vote in an important election during the pandemic. This was before any COVID vaccines were available. We established our own postal service with bipartisan teams to pick up mail-in ballots from drop boxes across the county. We held early voting in the week leading up to Election Day and had Election Day vote centers in every county high school and early voting location. We had many new people who volunteered for the first time to be election judges that year so that more vulnerable older people who had worked with us before didn't have to put their health at risk. In that election, in the 2020 presidential general election, more than 348,000 voters voted by mail-in ballot, more than 128,000 voted early, and more than 40,000 voted on Election Day. We not only had no indications of election fraud, we also had no indications of a spike in COVID cases either, due in no small part to our staff's excellent preparations. To me, that's not a source of concern, but a source of pride for our county's support for both democracy and public health, and could not have been accomplished without our staff's hard work. Thank you to everyone who was involved. I'm glad that Jim seems to be backing off of some of his earlier comments. He also raised questions in his more recent comments to MoCo 360 about how signatures on mail-in ballots are addressed by us. We're going to talk later today during the board attorney's report about that, as well as about how we review signatures on referendum petitions like the petitions we received last week. I hope that everyone on the board will participate in the discussion so that we can inform ourselves and the viewing public about what we're actually doing in our elections. That is all that I have to say. If anyone else would like to make a comment, I would be happy to give them that opportunity. Alex.
Mr. President, I think this is going to be one of those times when we'll have to disagree. I want to make it clear that I do not support the responses that our board president and secretary gave to MoCo 360, and I think they were ill-advised and reflect poor judgment. One can agree or disagree with what Jim said in that 2021 interview, but as he was then a candidate for elective office, he had a right to express his personal opinions about mail-in balloting or early voting. And I see nothing in what he said then that is inconsistent with his motion to certify the 2020 election results. Now, to me, bringing Ms. Bixby's attention to an interview that is now 3 years old reflects a disguised attempt by some people, as yet unknown to us, to discredit our former board president in the hopes of derailing his nomination to the State Board of Elections. Why? Perhaps because some of his remarks apparently offended some political constituency. I don't know. But we all know that the state board approves and regulates much of what the local boards do. And we have to do everything we can to foster good relationship with state board members, including now Jim Shalick. I don't think these responses will be helpful at all, especially when the last one essentially says by implication that we don't think Jim was a suitable choice for the state board. We just didn't have the courage to say it directly. And so I regret to have to express my disagreement, but I think this was a very bad move on our part, and I don't want to be associated with it. I dissent.
Thank you for that, Alex. I I have some thoughts, but I'm going to save them until others have a chance to weigh in. Diane.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I want to associate myself with Alex's comments. I'm in full agreement. I was highly disappointed to see the comments that were issued back to the paper to be printed. You all know that I'm a skeptic on the integrity of voter rolls. And I think that it would be wise to adopt a posture of skepticism and an alertness so that bad actors out there know that we don't just pass a blanket, there's nothing to see here, there are no problems. And I'll end my comments there.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Do others have comments that they would like to make? Well, if no one else has anything to say, let me say a couple of things in response to what's been said. I definitely agree that a candidate for office has a right to express whatever views he would like to express. I also believe that when the person who was the president of the board at the time expresses that he does not know whether there was fraud in that election, I do think that is inconsistent with the actions of moving to certify the results and certifying the results and not bringing that to the attention to the members of the board at the time. I think that at the time, if there were concerns about the presence of fraud, they should have been brought up at that time. And I do think that it is incumbent upon us as the current Board of Elections and myself as the current president of the board to defend our work, especially if the person who was president at the time is not doing so. And I think that our work in 2020 was exemplary. The last time I saw Jim Shalik in person, we had kind of a mock argument as to which election was harder between 2020 and 2022. And he was arguing 2020 and I was arguing 2022. They both were very difficult in different ways. And I think 2020 was a massive accomplishment, as I said in my comments. But when those comments, which were made in a public setting, are then brought to our attention and we are to respond to them, I don't think we have an opportunity to avoid commenting on whether we agree with the then leader of the board that we don't know if there was fraud. And I feel very strongly that our 2020 election work was among our best. We can argue over 2020 versus 2022. I do disagree strongly with Alex's statement that the failure to answer the question of whether we thought Jim should be appointed to the state board was itself a comment on his suitability for the state board. I disagree on that very strongly. I don't think it's our role to make that determination. And I know from my conversation with Ami that she didn't think it was our role either. We were talking about the comments about our election, and we really do think that it's up to the governor and the state senate um, to decide on those appointments. And let me say to Diane that I can say that I do know that you are a skeptic on some aspects of the election process. I am a skeptic on some aspects of the election process. Sometimes they are the same and sometimes they are different. I don't think there's any of us who believe that our blanket posture is nothing to see here. On the contrary, I just want to see evidence. I want to see, if somebody, but I will say this: if anyone on our board feels that there is evidence of problems, I would say please bring it up. I just don't think it's reasonable to not bring it up and then say later, well, I never really believed it. To me, um, that is um, that is cause for worry. But I don't think any of us are going to take things strictly at face value. Um, I know that anyone who's known me my entire life knows that that's not my pattern ever. I don't take anything at face value. And I do think that we should be appropriately paying attention, but I think we should be looking at evidence. And I do think that, well, let's just say that I don't believe that that my defense of my own work ends when I leave the Board of Elections. And I don't believe my defense of the board staff's work ends when I leave the Board of Elections. And in this instance, I think they did a tremendous job. And I'll just leave it there. Anybody else? Oh, Alex, and then
Well,
Archie.
David, I don't want to prolong the debate, but let me say, I didn't think that Jim was criticizing the board staff's work. They did the very best job they could with the system they had in place. I think he was speaking more about what he saw as the inherent risks in certain methods of voting. So I don't think he had an obligation to defend the work.
That is not what he said in the article.
Well,
what he said in the article was that he meant I didn't see any, as opposed to I have no idea. But there's a big difference between I have no idea and I didn't see any.
I get that, but it wasn't inaccurate for him to say he had no idea. I mean, in fact, it's a credit to him. It's a credit to him that he put whatever private doubts he may have had, because it didn't translate into evidence that was before him, and he certified anyways.
Alex, there is no one who had a better idea as to whether there was fraud in that election than Jim Shalik. He directed the whole thing.
I don't know.
You guys were in the majority. He had every opportunity
I don't know,
to look at what was happening, and the idea that that he deserves credit for expressing doubt, I just have a problem with. He was in the best. He was in the best position of anyone to see if there was fraud.
Well, I don't know if that's true, but all I'm saying is, that was 3 years ago. He was a candidate for elective office, and now for us to be insulting him like this, it's not going to be helpful. I don't think he's happy about what was said, and it just didn't need to be said because he wasn't criticizing our work. So
well,
that's how.
I disagree. First of all, I'm sorry if he's insulted. We were talking about what he said, not about him. I've made clear to anyone who will listen that I like him, that I think he's a good guy. I told a room full of Democrats last week that he's a great guy, but I just disagree with what he said. Um, and I don't think we had a choice as to whether to respond under the circumstances. I think that for the president of the board to say he doesn't know, he has not that he doesn't know, not that he's not sure, he has no idea whether there was fraud. I would hope that he has an idea. I would guess that he has an idea. And I don't think he gets a pass because he's running for office. Now, maybe other politicians would view it differently. I'm not a politician. I am, I think that for election officials or former election officials to say they don't have an idea as to whether there was fraud when they watched every portion of that process. I have a problem with that. I am sorry if he's offended. I am not sorry for what I said. But and I do want to work with him, and I want him to work with us, because we can do a lot more for Montgomery County together than in opposition. But I will say that I do think that um, that for him to say he has no idea is not just keeping his private worries to himself. That's because he chose to share his private worries with the biggest skeptics of the process out there instead of telling them about what he did see.
Well, good luck working with him now. That's all I can say. It's not going to be helpful, but I know we have many other things to talk about in the meeting. So if you are happy to move on, Mr. President, I am too.
Well, I appreciate the nature of that particular comment. Margie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think, and I think it should be of general thought that even the implications of voter fraud is a very serious matter. It's not just something that someone just says, and it's there to question the voter process, which is fine, and we need to do, but to say there was fraud on a past election, like I support David and Ami's response. I felt like they had every right to respond, and they had to respond because it's not just a comment made on elections based on who was running against who in an issue area. It was questioning a very serious and important process to our democracy, and to say that implying fraud, I think is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. And I wholeheartedly stand and support David and Ami's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. Diane.
Yeah, just put a final cap on it. And what I was going to say kind of responds to Margie. He didn't say there was fraud. He said he had no idea. And my comment on that is when we have a process that is based so heavily on the honor system, one has to have trust. And I, as a skeptic, because of human nature, know there are bad actors out there. I'm not saying specifically. In general, I believe in the old axiom, trust but verify. And I think until the voter rolls receive some more skepticism and review, that one can't know. If it's based on honor, there's not going to be evidence unless
Diane,
one looks to verify
Diane,
it.
what makes you say that it's based on honor? We have many different ways that we check on things. And you voted for that certification. Are you saying that you don't have any idea whether there was fraud?
Yeah, David, no, I think we did a great job given the system that we're in. I'm not criticizing any of our actors, our board. We have a system that I believe has weaknesses. And when I say the honor system, that is when a voter presents themselves as an eligible voter for whatever reason. There are many different qualifications, not many, but that is the honor system. And that's to what I'm referring.
Well,
I, as a skeptic, have prefaced this following comment with that, acknowledging I'm just a skeptic in general. That's why trust and verify. I have not a shred of doubt or concern in the way we conduct our canvass, our vote count. I don't want any of that to be misconstrued.
thank you. I've heard you say that before, and I appreciate your saying that.
Absolutely.
But that actually puts you in a different place than the comments that we were responding to, because that would have been a good thing to say. We worked very hard on that canvas.
Absolutely.
And
I'm proud of the work.
and our staff worked even harder. Um, and and our staff put themselves at risk to a far greater extent than we did as board members. We were allowed to participate virtually that year. Um, but and I appreciate, because Diane, I've heard you say multiple times that your concern is not with Montgomery County, Maryland. And while we all can draw our own conclusions about other places, we all have a front row seat for Montgomery County, Maryland. And I appreciate your saying that. I would just say that I still think it is completely within the norm for the job of being a member of the Board of Elections to defend our work and to defend the fact that we do have an idea. Now, if the question was, can we be 100% certain that there were 0 fraudulent votes counted in any particular election, that would be very different. Okay, but that wasn't the question. And the statement that was made was having no idea whether it happened. And we do have an idea. We have we sweat the details, and we look at things very carefully. So anyway, anybody else who would like to say anything before we move on to the rest of the agenda? Ami, you are muted.
I'm on mute. I didn't mean to
Okay.
be. Sorry for my delayed participation with my picture in, but I just wanted to say that I agree that there could perhaps be fraud, but I think to say I don't know whether there's any fraud or not is not an appropriate statement for the chair of the election board to say. If you ever said that, David, I would criticize you immediately. And if I ever
You
said
wouldn't be
it
the only one.
myself, well, okay, but no, I believe that I stand by what I wrote and signed. And I will continue to stand by it. I think it was an inappropriate statement for Jim to make. I've supported him in lots of ways. I contributed to his campaign. And he was actually the first person that supported my campaign some many years ago. And I think we can still remain friends, even if I disagree with the statement he made. I would not expect him to agree with every statement I've made. And I'd be happy to discuss that with him. And I'm hoping that he takes my invitation to sit down and have a cup of coffee. And I guess that's all I'll say in my defense at this point.
Thank you, Ami. I will just say that I agree that well, I can't say that I contributed to his campaigns. I can I can say that that we've had a friendly relationship. That some of you may recall that when he left the board, I told the story of how he coached me in traffic court free of charge in a way that was very helpful to me that he did not have to do. When I got there, the last person I wanted to see was anybody associated with the Board of Elections, and he was there just by coincidence. I think he's a good guy. Like I said, I've told anyone who will listen that he is a good guy. Quite frankly, after those comments, I get some heat for that. I am, and I'm sorry if he's angry. I hope we can work together. I disagree with lots of people. I disagree with family members. I disagree with many politicians, both of every political affiliation. That doesn't have to be the end of the relationship. I hope it isn't. And but on the other hand, there are certain things I do think need to be responded to. So with that, if there are no further comments on this subject, we will move on to the next part of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move to the disclosure of campaign contributions and attendance at events. I would like to remind board members of that the bylaws require that, but I should say the bylaws provide that a board member may attend candidate fundraisers held by candidates or ballot issue committees on our ballot, provided the board member reports it to the board and does not publicly indicate at the event that he or she is a board member, and that disclosure requirement applies whether or not you paid for the event. And that a board member may make campaign contributions to a candidate or ballot issue committee for an election on our ballot, provided that you disclose the date, amount, and recipient of your contribution. And again, that's whether or not the contribution is associated with an event. Does anyone have something to report today? Daniel.
Mr. President, I attended a District 14 event that was organized by Senator Greg Zucker, and then I'm also going to be attending a District 20 event, which is organized by the delegation.
Okay. But future events are not reportable, and only fundraising events.
Okay.
So the event for Senator Zucker, are you reporting a contribution or just attendance?
Just attended. I made no contribution. The event was held on the 12th of June, and I made no contribution. I was invited to attend.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a disclosure to make? Okay, we will move on to public comment. Before we start public comment, I would like to give a reminder there as well. Under the board's bylaws, public participation at a meeting should be scheduled and pre-approved by the board president. I do have the discretion to allow public participation even if the request is not scheduled and pre-approved. As our website says, each speaker will be given 3 minutes, and this applies to elected officials, government and organization representatives, as well as individuals. I am aware of one person who signed up in advance. That would be Mr. Michael Fletcher. But could we please promote him to be a panelist? See that he's coming.
My video, it won't come on.
All right, can you try, you've tried turning it off and on, Mr. Fletcher? Not the computer, the video.
Right, no.
Okay, well, in the interest of time.
I can give my comments in the blind here. You don't have to see me reading my comments.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm gonna accept that. Ordinarily, we do like to see the people who are talking to us, but why don't you welcome back. We know you well. I want to publicly thank you for working at our mail-in ballot canvas. And why don't you go ahead and give your comments?
All right, I will. Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Fletcher. I live in Durwood. I have 3 subjects that I would like to touch on today. First, prior to the primary elections, I gave Mr. Brajkovic the results of a review of ballots and scanner tapes from precinct 04-038. The review supported the definition promulgated by the State Board of Elections that a blank ballot is a blank page or card of a multi-page ballot. However, my review found discrepancies between the numbers of total votes and undervotes documented on scanner tapes, and those numbers from the ballots and the BMD cards and on the EL30A report for that precinct. I would be interested in getting the possible reasons for these discrepancies, and I intend to follow up with Mr. Brekovic later and discuss these. The complete report for the precinct 04-038 has been sent to the contact us email address for the board, so I think you all should have it. Secondly, I am concerned about the possibility that non-citizens may vote in the upcoming election. Non-citizens will be applying for social benefits and driver's licenses. As you know, the agencies that respond to these applications are also intake points for voter registration. The personnel in these agencies are supposed to ensure that the persons filing a registration application meet the requirements to register, including being a U.S. citizen. Also, the application itself asks the applicants to affirm that he or she is a U.S. citizen. However, the large number of non-citizens applying for services, I'm concerned that corners may be cut and non-citizens may end up on the Maryland registration list. I would like to know what steps the Montgomery County Board of Elections will take to ensure that the votes of eligible voters are not canceled by the votes of non-citizens in the upcoming election. I know of one step that could be taken, that is to train election judges on the provisions of election law, section 3-308 C1, which states, when an individual applies to register to vote at a precinct polling place on election day, the election judge shall determine whether the applicant resides in the precinct in which the applicant applied and is qualified to become a registered voter. Qualification to become a registered voter includes being a U.S. citizen. Third and finally, I have concerns about the newly passed legislation that has the potential to weaponize the state prosecutor against citizens who raise questions about the election system. This is HB 0333, and its provisions include possible referral of election misinformation and disinformation issues.
Mr. Fletcher?
Yes.
All right, your 3 minutes has ended.
All right, thank you very much.
Go ahead and finish your sentence, Mr. Fletcher.
Okay, well, there are 2 more sentences.
Go ahead.
The definitions of dis and misinformation include incorrect or misleading information regarding the time, place, or manner of an election results, or voting rights. I think these definitions are subject to interpretation to the point they may infringe on the public's right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What would the board consider dis or misinformation regarding election results? That's the extent of my comments.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to call on Boris to, I think, respond on all 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher, for your comments. And I did receive your report or your review of all 438 precinct. If my memory serves me well, I have to emphasize 2 things. I believe I have a pretty good record answering requests that came from you, and I plan to answer this one as well. The issue was that I got this report in the run-up to the beginning of the early canvass, and with the unfolding presidential primary elections, it was put on a side to be addressed after the elections itself. Very briefly, I'm gonna touch upon, I would say, 3 things from your first point. In your report, in your statements, you conclude that definition of blank ballot that was presented to the board, to you, and to the general public is accurate one, because your independent research confirmed the numbers of the blank ballots as it was indicated before. I believe that this definition of blank ballots was long-standing one since the voting system was put in place. But again, this is more of a State Board of Elections issue to answer than mine. The second thing I would like to say in regards to your report is that your independent research and count of the ballots produced the same report, same results that were available on the EL report that was given out to you. Basically, you confirmed the accuracy of those counts. And the third thing is, again, I really, Mr. Fletcher, didn't have time to go into every single line that you produced in your 7-page report, but I plan to. But very initial review indicate the reason for the discrepancies you mentioned in your report itself. When it comes to polling place 0438, there were 3 scanners, and you should have received copies of 3 tapes from those 3 scanners. In your report, you are referencing just 2 tapes, which produce numbers that do not match the report that indicates the results. So I am not sure if those tapes are intermingled with the remaining polling place documents that we submitted to you. But in any case, if you, for whatever reason, don't have it in your possession, we are more than happy to produce that copy and give it to you. That is my response for the comment, for the first comment that you presented today. The second one is in regards to same day. The way I understood your comments, Mr. Fletcher, it's a same day registration, and people registering at the polling places to become registered voters in Montgomery County and vote their ballots. In state of Maryland, there are certain requirements to make you eligible to become registered voter. Those include age requirement of 16 plus, being U.S. citizen, being Maryland resident. Those same requirements apply whether you are registering at the polling place, whether you're doing online, whether you're submitting a paper application at the board here, or you are doing it at MVA or any other agencies. It is fact that same document is being provided to any applicant, same questions have to be answered, and same oath has to be signed off, claiming that under threat of perjury, I attest that my statements provided above are correct. We do train our election judges, and I believe that it's well understood the content of the application that needs to be completed by the applicant at the polling place. And the third comment that you made in regards to the bill that addresses misinformation or disinformation in the election process. My understanding and reading of the bill is that the legislature, the assembly itself, gave the authority to the State Board of Elections to implement the provisions of the bill. If my memory serves me well, that bill even calls for the State Board of Elections to establish a portal that would enable any interested citizen to submit a complaint about potential misinformation, disinformation, or similar. I believe that bill also calls for the State Board of Elections to periodically review those complaints and take necessary actions as necessary. So bill has been signed recently. I am not in position to elaborate how far the system, the State Board of Elections is putting systems in place to implement the bill itself. In the course of my report today, you all will learn, I believe you already know, that state certified the last elections on June 13th. So I'm pretty sure that that will be coming up on their to-do list as well after closing presidential primary elections. Those would be my responses to today's Mr. Fletcher's comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr.
We will certainly
Fletcher.
touch base on this report after the board meeting.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher, and thank you, Boris. Diane.
Yeah, I want to thank Mr. Fletcher for his comments and his hard work. And I want to ask Boris for just a point of clarification to the second point about same-day registration. You did mention that an oath is presented and needs to be signed, but did you I don't think I heard, is there any sort of verification that needs to be presented to document one's citizenship?
So the same requirement for any applicant to complete the form, check the necessary boxes as accurate, provides their signature and confirm under the threat of perjury the statements made in the application are the same whether the application is submitted at the board, at the any agency, or at the polling place. So verification that you are referring to is not something that is being done at the polling place. It is completing the form itself and providing affirmation under the threat of the perjury that statements are accurate.
So it's the honor system that's used to ensure the veracity. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, but I would leave it to Kevin if that's the proper legal term to apply this situation.
Well, Boris has explained the process. I mean, it is, you know, the person who's applying is applying under penalties of perjury, that they're willing to commit a crime. I don't know that I'd call it the honor system. It sounds fairly dishonest. But they are, you know, they are affirming under the penalties of perjury that the information is accurate.
Okay, so rather than honor, maybe I should have said verification.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
That's the verification. Is signing the oath. There is no further verification.
Correct.
Boris, could you please?
Thanks for the.
Thank you, Diane. Are you? I'm sorry. Are you done?
Yeah, no, it is as I suspected it was. Thanks.
Okay, Boris, would you please remind me again about there were some provisional ballots that Ami and I rejected that I'd like to put that as part of the conversation as well.
I will, absolutely. But before that, may I just say that once we receive the voter registration application, the content, basically the data is, we say bounced against, but it's verified against MVA or Social Security Administration, depending which data was provided by the applicant. If we get MVA ID or driving license number, we verify it against the MVA, and the signature provided at MVA becomes the signature in the database in case of applicant who did it online. So this data flows between us, MVA, and Social Security Administration. The second thing that David just brought up correctly is that I believe May 23rd, Ami and David met here at the board and we broadcast live a review of all provisional ballots that staff prepared to be, in our view, rejected, and the board representatives sat down to review them. Two of those provisional applications, voters indicated on them that they were not US citizens. Staff presented those applications to be rejected on grounds of failing to meet the necessary requirements in the state of Maryland to become a registered voter. And David and Ami rejected those two provisional applications without even opening and to looking at anything further, just on the statement that applicants were not US citizens.
And to be fair, we don't know whether they were US citizens or not. We don't know whether they could have checked the wrong box. But by checking the wrong box, we reject, you know, with the wrong in quotes, but by checking the box that said that they were not citizens, we rejected their ballots.
We don't know for sure, but if I can expand a bit, David, on this one, I believe that one of those applicants was well over 16, but also indicated that she was both under 16 and non-US citizen in the same time. So we can talk about was it a human error or not, but the staff did what the law requires. The board representatives did what the law required, and we rejected provisional ballot. And as a next step, the voter was canceled in MD voters in our voter was removed from the voter rolls, and that's how the law dictates the process.
Okay, thank you, Boris. Any other comments before we move on?
Yeah, I want to make kind of a point on the other one, a last point. My criticism is not with our staff, who is, in my mind, beyond suspicion, with the way they are working within the system they have. My skepticism, for all to hear, is with the unverifiable nature of the system that we have. Thanks. Thank you for the clarification on all those points.
Okay,
Anytime.
thank you, Diane. Okay, let's move to the director's report. Boris.
Okay, I will go very briefly through the director's report. The report was shared with the board and published on our website last Thursday. It will remain there for anyone who is interested to go more into details. Documents, as I said, for the board and for the public were prepared timely and shared. When it comes to voter registration statistics, this is that time of the year when voter registration has advanced close deadline, 3 weeks before the election day itself, and doesn't open until 11 days after elections too. Therefore, the statistics were not pulled. They will be pulled on the 1st of the next month for the previous month. The state board, as I mentioned earlier, certified the 2024 presidential primary on June 13. When it comes to the personnel, board members had an opportunity to meet Sandy Prudenti, who is our new water services manager. She had the pleasure to join us on the first day of canvass for the 2020 presidential primary elections, but it was a good place, a good timing to start. Vote by mail program manager one position that has been vacant for some time now will be advertised soon, and we are looking forward to hiring a team member for this position, especially in preparation for the 2024 general. Deputy election director position remains open until filled. When it comes to the temporary positions, the board is well aware that we do hire a lot of temporary team members, our colleagues, in the run-up to elections, and that number goes down after the election itself. Board of Elections, I won't be the first one to tell you, is like an accordion when it comes to staffing, because we do expand and contract depending on the election calendar itself. Some temporary team members will stay with us until further notice, having in mind that the petition that came to us and all other tasks that we have to do in the post-election process and preparation for the general, while the rest of the team members will start rejoining us later in August or September this year. When it comes to budget, we prepared and shared with the board a tracking report. I just need to emphasize two things maybe. Number one, most of our expenditures do come in the last quarter of the year, and the most invoices we get at the last month of the fiscal year. So the bills are coming in, we are processing them as they're coming. The next big news about budget is that budget for the fiscal 25 was approved by the council in a bit over $17 million, and that includes $70,000 additional funding for the outreach media activities. The staff did apply and got a grant of $48,500 of grants from the funds that came from U.S. Department of Homeland Security through the Maryland State Department of Homeland Security for any enhancement of security measures with the board, and we did implement some enhancement to utilize that money. When it comes to the section activities, when it comes to water services, I would say that just like initial batch of signatures for the petition to amend the county charter is in. It will preoccupy staff for a number of days. The legal deadline to process signatures once received is together with all the necessary documentation is 20 days. Our understanding from the organizers of the petition that this is just the first batch, that subsequent batches will be delivered to the staff to process, and the deadline to have all the batches delivered to the staff is July 2029. At the same time, as I said, a voter registration closes 3 weeks before the elections, open after the elections. Life still goes on. People still go to MV, people change addresses, new registrants and everything. We have a certain backlog that we have to address. It's nothing new. This backlog is created after every election. The only issue now is that the time and we will be addressing this backlog overlaps with the petition. Our answer is, as we said multiple times, is absolute commitment to finish all the tasks accurately and timely as much as possible. I believe that we enjoy the board's support in keeping more than expected temporary team members on a payroll to help us go through these tasks in a timely manner. When it comes to IT and training section, we are doing inventory as required by the state board of elections. We are checking all the equipment for some if there were potentially if there would be any need for potential replacement of equipment for 2024 general, and maybe for the training section to emphasize that for the general election, we will, instead of having one set of training for all the new and returning election judges, we are designing a concept that will allow us to train more hands-on election judges who served in the primary and get them ready for the general versus new applicants who never served, who have not served before. When it comes to the operations section, it's, as Mindy would say, cleanup time. We are limited with the space. We have to be organized. We have to put everything in place and get ready for the general elections. And we are getting ready, waiting for the state's approval, of course, to get into shredding of the items that could be shredded, for example, unvoted ballot. And if Kevin tells us at some point that some of ballots from the previous elections could be shredded, that would be a big plus for us as well. When it comes to recruitment, election support, we are finalizing the payroll. Checks have to go out for all the volunteers that we are most grateful for, who helped us serving during early voting, election day, different positions in the election process. What we found interesting, and I believe it will help us going forward, is that in the course of in-person voting, around 1,800 individuals expressed interest to serve as election workers going forward. We already reached out to each one of them, hoping that they will go through with the application and take part in the trainings and join us for the general election. That would be my general report.
Thank you, Boris. I have a question about the last thing you said. Do we know what the party affiliations are of those 1,800 people?
I didn't look.
Okay.
I didn't look because it's just a list with the contacts, and we just go through the list. I would hope that, as we will see at my very brief presentation that I just want to go through, we want everyone to come forward and apply and serve.
Yes.
But yes, we are looking for more Republicans, more unaffiliated. Again, everyone is more than welcome. We are looking for everyone, but Republicans and unaffiliated in particular.
Yeah, that's why I was asking the question, just to be clear, was because I know that we have a particular need for those party affiliations. Diane.
Okay, thanks. This is probably going to be a really quick question. My ears perked up when you said that we had applied for a grant and were awarded. Back to shades of 2020 with the old CTCL grants. But I am still wholly unfamiliar with what the state homeland security, oh, now I can't read the notes. The $48,000 grant to Department of Homeland Security through SHSP for security measures. Is that physical security? Is that IT? What?
I understand the question. I'm not in position to provide any
Okay.
security related answer in open session.
Got it. So we can talk off. Thank you.
No problem.
A question for Kevin. In order for us to have that conversation, if we wanted to at least have the beginning of that conversation today, since we have an executive session scheduled, are we able to do that, or do we need to put that off for another time?
So when we close the meeting, let's add to it to address a security issue.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you see, Diane, I'm trying to help you get the conversation right away.
Thank you.
So okay.
I'd be willing to wait, but I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, obviously, and if Boris is not ready for the conversation in full, we can start it and continue it on another occasion. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Boris, what feedback are we getting back from the volunteers, and how are we utilizing that feedback to improve our processes if necessary?
You mean election judges who actually served? So I was one of them at some point in 2018, and I know that each election worker has their own assigned recruitment that are assigned geographically through the county, and information do flow. We get some information through, some people still rely mainly on the phone call, some will send an email out, but we will get also notes as well. Just for the record, for example, Mr. Fletcher was part of our canvassing, and he may provide comments on the instructions that we give. We have also one chief judge at least provided me, I believe, with quite a few pages of comments how we could do things differently. So the communication does flow between the staff and the volunteers. And as I said many times, we are open to hear any comments. Sometimes comments are very location specific. So that's to look at, as Janet would know the best, what are the schemas, should the BMD be at this location, move it to this side. Sometimes I'm more general, so we approach them all equal.
Just want to indicate that going through the canvassing process, it's really eye-opening how when people sit next to each other in a bipartisan manner, right? How building those relationships are very critical. And so I just want to thank you and thank the staff for making that environment where the focus of all canvassers are how do we get this right? And so thank you for that.
Thank you, Dan. We are all in it together. So we all were there from the very beginning till the very end. So.
Indeed. Thank you. Any other questions for Boris about his report? Okay, seeing none, we will move to the board attorney's report.
David,
Oh,
just
yeah.
very briefly, I had a very short presentation that for some reason I cannot bring.
That's right. I'm sorry. You have a presentation that comes after your report.
Yeah, it was kind of.
And I apologize. I didn't mean to skip over it.
No, not a problem.
Kevin, you can hang on if you don't mind. We'll let Boris give us his presentation. He has some very interesting data on the presidential primary election.
If I think that I did it right.
Yeah, you just have to go to slideshow and then you're good. Excellent.
Okay, as I said, this will be very brief, nothing compared to what we do after the full election cycle. I just wanted to point out few items that I keep in mind going forward. The team is looking at, and I believe will be of interest to the board as well and to the observers. The key observations, very short, reflect on the turnout, mode of voting, mail-in ballots return rates, return pace of those ballots, election workers, and provisional ballots itself. So when it comes to the turnout, everyone said that we had a very low turnout in Montgomery County. I just wanted to put it out there that it was on level that it was in across the state. There are a few counties that had a bit higher turnout, but if you look at the state itself, Anne Arundel, Prince George's, and Frederick, we are in the same on the same level. When it comes to mode of voting, lower than expected in-person voting, higher than expected that maybe a percentage of vote by mail constituted 46% of the total. When it comes to
just a quick question on the turnout. Those figures are percent figures, right? On the second slide.
these, yeah, sorry, these are percentages.
Okay, got it.
I
Thank you.
apologize. So this is the mode of voting. I just wanted to show that vote by mail was the largest option selected by the voters in this election itself. The next one is return rate. This is the number of ballots, mail-in ballots returned versus number of applications submitted and processed. Basically, how many ballots were sent out, how many of those ballots came back. As you can see, we had a very low return rate in Montgomery County. It's bit less than the average for the state, and it's bit less than it was 2022 presidential gubernatorial primary election. What is important here is the last bullet point, that where you can see that we had 20 percentage point jump in return rate between the primary in general in 2022. And we believe that the same jump will reflect itself in the 2024 as well. It's not new. It's we can discuss what are the driving factors behind it, whether a large percentage of unaffiliated voters just don't return or doesn't vote in the primary. We also know that we have certain number of, I think we can call them federal voters who don't take, who do not participate in the primary itself, but wait for the general. However, I believe that we will go up to 80-85% return rate for the general election as well, which will be which will add to the canvas requirements, to the days and the number of teams needed. When it comes to the return rate of mail-in ballots, I literally could have copied the same slide I presented for 2022 primary and 2022 general election. This is mail-in ballot drop boxes return pace, and you will see it once again that our voters receive the ballots early and return them very much right before the election day. We had ballots coming in all the time. We had canvass going on since April 22nd, but board will also recall that most of our canvass days were half days. And if you look at this slide, I think this slide speaks more than words, explaining why those half days were necessary, why we couldn't have the full day. So going forward, I hope our messaging and voters' reaction will help us have more ballots returned earlier, so we will have more ballots canvassed earlier and the results published on the election day. So when it comes to the mode of the return, I looked for the last, for the 2022, drop boxes were more popular than mail. this election, mail was more popular than drop boxes. I found it quite interesting and just wanted to point it out. I don't know what if this will be the holding pattern for the general, but I think it's good for us to have this piece of information, especially going forward and meeting the postmasters of Montgomery County, saying that people do utilize the USPS to return their ballots. When it comes to election workers, it's not new information for the board or for anyone that our number of volunteers was less than expected. We are not the only jurisdiction, either in the state or the nation, that had this issue. 50% of election workers were returning election workers, which it has its benefits, meaning that we are increasing the pool of interested citizens, our residents of the county who are ready to take part in this process. I would just on a professional and personal level like to see the number of returning election workers to be a bit higher, because we do count on institutional memory, we do count on institutional knowledge, and we do count on transfer of that knowledge between election workers who've been doing this for quite some time and the incoming election workers who can have mentors on a day of early voting or election day itself. Nothing unusual that we didn't have, that we had unequal participation of volunteers across the county. It same goes for the party affiliations as well. The board knows well that we did try to target mass emails to certain locations and certain parties affiliations. That was our response, our effort to increase the numbers of volunteers in those deficient areas. It was very hard to recruit chief judges and same-day registration election workers. So this is one of those things that will be in our focus going forward. We are still looking into options, trying to see if other jurisdictions had the same issue. We are fully aware that there are a bit more requirements for these two positions than regular VOPs, but we do trust our volunteers that they will step up and assume these roles going forward. There was a high number of younger election workers. Again, very nice. We really very much appreciate it. The problem only is that a number of high school seniors are not coming back to November. So these are a very good number to have for the primary, but we have to make an extra effort to supplement that number for the general election. I just wanted to point out the demographics, how it looks like. Again, at some point after general election, having a proper conversation comparing across the election cycles will give a better picture. And this is the party affiliation. As I said earlier, and David made the comment, we are looking forward to any possibility to engage Republican Party members and affiliated Republicans to step up and join us and serve as election workers. When it comes to the provisional ballots, the board would know that staff did try to make extra efforts in order to address number of provisionals and especially those stubborn codes that are repeating itself. I didn't really study across the state every county, but I believe that's only us and the PG that experienced significant reduction of number of provisionals compared to the last elections. Our total number of provisionals went down 22%. The number of voters who requested vote by mail but ended up voting provisionals compared to the last elections went 24%. The number of voters who ended up voting wrong party ballot went down 50%. And the issue that we still have to figure out how to move needle in the right direction is number of voters who voted at the wrong precinct. So I don't believe there's a silver bullet to address any of these numbers. I don't believe there's a magic switch, because I'm pretty sure someone would have flipped it already if there was one. But what we are doing, what we are planning to repeat I believe is making a difference. Increased communication via emails, via media, via any outreach efforts produces the results that I believe we have some reason to be proud of. To which extent these numbers will hold for the general, we will have to go through it and see. And that will be a very short presentation set for today.
Thank you very much, Boris. I will call on Kina first, and then because she has her hand up, and then if anybody else, I have some questions, but I'll let Kina go before me. Go ahead, Kina.
Thank you, Boris, for an excellent presentation. I had a question regarding the mail-in ballots, and as you mentioned, the very equivalent spike or trend from the 2022 election. Has there been consideration for working with the candidates to integrate some kind of voter education work plan, if you will, for those who do get mail-in ballots? As we all know, mail-in ballots are available quite early in comparison to the actual vote in person day. And with all of that time, it seems that people seemingly think that their choice of candidate might change from the point that their mail-in ballot physically comes to them to the point of the in-person election week. I just want to be very clear to specify the in-person portion. Has there been a consideration for working with candidates to develop some type of voter education feature to their campaign?
Boris, could you show us that slide again, please, while you're answering Kina's question?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood well. Working with campaigns, did you say, or candidates?
Yes, correct.
I think she's asking whether there's anything that the Board of Elections can do with candidates to encourage them to encourage voters to vote earlier. Is that essentially, do I have that right, Kina?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have to provide a few things. Number one is that I believe that everyone should take their time, make their mind, and vote their ballot when they're ready. What we are asking voters is, once you make up your mind, you vote your ballot, don't keep it on the kitchen table, just drop it in the Dropbox or put it at the USPS system so it can come to us. It's the second thing is, I believe that that board did attempt before the primary election to call on all campaigns to join us at the meeting and discuss issues that could be addressed jointly for the primary election. And if my memory serves me well, I and the board emphasis was on work with your voters. Once they are ready, let them send us their ballots. So I believe that that's something that could be done again as a board, as a group setting with all the campaigns running in the election, working individually with the campaigns. I have not really considered that, to be honest, but I believe the forum that board created in the run-up to the primary election is, in my view, the right one to proceed.
Let me also say, Boris, that the dynamic for a general election might be different than for a primary election. And it could be that by including the Republican and Democratic Party organizations that we may be able to make that point without necessarily having to meet with individual campaigns. We can invite them just like we did for the meeting before the primary, but
I agree, and I believe, David, it's if I read media reporting right, it will be a kind of interest of both major parties to have their voters commit their ballots as soon as possible. So we will see.
That is certainly true on a national basis. Whether it's true in Maryland, I guess we will find out. So, okay, Diane.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Naiman. Boris, quickly, apologies if I misheard, but did you say that mail-in balloting was the largest percentage of voting? Because I don't think that's right.
It was 46% of ballots cast in this primary election came through vote by mail.
But that means more than half came through in person.
It's literally 46% vote by mail, 4% provisional, and the half is in person, early voting and election day.
Okay, but
Okay,
provisional is also in
in
person.
person.
It is, yeah.
And you know how wedded I am to try and encourage people to vote in person. So when I hear an incorrect statistic like that, I just want to make sure we correct it.
To be fair to Boris, he gave us the plurality winner. And it's a matter of opinion as to how you bunch them together.
Okay, I'm sure of no criticisms of you, Boris.
No, it's absolutely fine because I do group them as a 4 different categories because on the staff level we have 4 different processes to run. So, but I do hear you that you separated on 2 categories, in person versus mail. In that sense, you are right. It's 44 versus 46.
54
Thank
versus
you.
46.
Yeah, sorry, 54 versus 46.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Diane, are you done?
I am. Thank you.
Okay. On this slide, let me just say that the way I looked at this slide is I said it's close to 50-50 between in person and by mail. And then when Boris showed the other slide that showed drop boxes versus US mail, that also was close to 50-50. Although in this election, US mail had more than drop boxes. We don't know whether the next election is going to be the same or not. And, and we will find out. To me, we would be hard pressed to suggest that our voters have made a choice for in person versus vote by mail or vote by mail versus in person. It's clearly a pretty big split between what people are doing between both. Boris, can we go back to the graph about when people return their ballots? So there are a couple of things here that I just wanted to note. It does appear that we had a slight increase when we had our first canvass session.
Right.
I think it's a good thing that we publicize that and get the word out that yes, we are available. Then the other thing I wanted to note is that when it got to be about 2 weeks before the election, the level did not have the dramatic jump, but it did have an increase that remained from roughly May 1st until May 14th. Like I said, the last 2 weeks of the campaign, and then obviously a huge number that returned a huge increase, I should say, that returned their ballots on the 13th or the 14th. And so we still have many people who are waiting until the very end. My reaction to that is I tell people similar to what Boris, I think, said, that if you're ready, no reason to wait. If you're not ready, wait till you're ready. I don't want anybody to vote before they're ready. I don't want anybody to vote before they've figured out what they want to do on everything on the ballot. But if they're ready, there's a lot of ballots, I think, that get lost in various places in people's homes. And so I think there's a benefit to that. Now, Boris, you also, hang on one second. Could you, we talked about the mode of voting. Your point about the return rate was that our return rate was below the states for primary elections.
That's correct.
Do you know whether in 2022, whether our general election return rate was above or below the states?
I can check, but I think that it was more or less the same. If my memory serves me well, but 2022 sounds such a distant past now.
Well, I understand that. It seems like it was ages ago. Anyway,
David, just despite the lowest rate, we were still the county with the highest number of vote by mail ballots returned.
Oh, understood. We always are.
Yeah.
You know, and if our voters were to return more, we would, you know, it would take us that much longer. So understood. Okay, I don't have anything. I don't have anything further. Does anybody else have anything further on Boris's presentation? Okay, so now we will go to the board attorney's report.
Okay, thank you, David. So let me start with an update on the Gibson case, which is the case involving the 2020 election results that required the Attorney General's office to put a litigation hold on destroying the materials associated with the 2020 election until the case has been resolved. Mindy, if you're listening, I'm trying my best. I've reached out to the Attorney General's office and I've asked them to request an expedited ruling from the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. The Assistant Attorney General agrees with me. He's trying to get approval to go ahead and do that. But the goal would be to see whether we can get the Fourth Circuit to expedite a ruling, because we are genuinely running into a real space problem, which Mindy reminds me of every time I see her, both in terms of physical space to go ahead and just maintain old ballots and old election material, as well as digital space for video footage and everything of that nature. So I am trying to move it along to the extent I can, and hopefully we'll make some progress in that regard. So the second issue is, as you are well aware, we have received a petition. Friendly reminder, your bylaws provide that you're not permitted to sign a petition, so please don't. But we have gotten a petition with regard to term limits to 2 terms for the county executive. It was filed in the county executive's office last week. There is one piece that is still missing on that, which is a petition fund report, which we are in the process of receiving. And at that point, we'll begin there's a 20-day period to go ahead and do the verification process.
Can I ask a question, Kevin?
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Does that mean that the 20 days doesn't start until you receive that? Or did the 20 days start when the petitions were delivered?
The 20 days starts when the petition fund report is filed.
So you cannot start on the petitions yet?
We're not doing anything in terms of actually processing, validating signatures until we get that last piece of the information.
Okay.
And that will start the clock for the validation period of 20 days.
And you're going to explain what that report is, because I
Yeah,
sure
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way this works is that there is a lot of prep work that has to be done before you can do verification and validation, because the petition has to be put in batches of 25. It needs to be numbered if it hasn't been numbered. There are a variety of things that Sandy, Lolita, and their team need to do to go ahead and get it prepared to do the validation verification process. And let me take a little walk down memory lane in terms of how this all worked. Back in 2003, 2004, the state guidelines with regard to validation of petitions was that, in essence, if you could find the voter in the MD voters, the voter registration database, you could locate that person, then you would count that person's signature for purposes of determining whether it should be counted for a petition. And obviously for a charter amendment, it's 30,000, it's 5% if it's a challenge to a county law. So there are different procedures and different processes. We're obviously dealing with a charter amendment that would require 10,000 valid signatures in order for the question to appear on the ballot. So that was the process that the state board and the guidance the state board gave us back in 2003, 4, 5. And at that point, there was a challenge to a county bill regarding transgender legislation in 2006, I believe. And we used the state's guidelines that were present, that were being used at that time. And we determined there were enough signatures to have that question appear on the ballot. The case went up to the Maryland Court of Appeals, and the Maryland Court of Appeals said, no, the state's guidelines in this regard are wrong because under 6203 of the election law article, it says to sign a petition, an individual shall sign the individual's name as it appears on the statewide voter registration list or the individual's surname of registration and at least one full given name and the initials of any other names. And then it goes on to say, to include the signer's name as it was signed, the signer's address, the date of signing, and any other information required by the board. And so in Doe, the court said, no, 6203 says you have to sign your name as it appears on the voter registration list or the individual's surname and at least one full given name and the initials of any other names. And on that basis, the court said there were not enough valid signatures and the question did not appear on the ballot. So fast forward, different policies and guidance given by the state board was issued following the Doe case. And then we got about a year later and we got to fire and rescue. Fire and rescue involved ambulance fees with regard that would be charged by the county. There was a big push by volunteer fire departments to challenge that legislation. And we followed the state's guidelines that basically said you need to sign your name as it appears on the voter registration list. And based upon that guidance, that petition was rejected because the rate of return was almost like 22% because people's signatures were illegible. You couldn't discern that they had signed it as it appeared on the voter registration list. So we went back up to the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals in that case said, well, what we said in Doe is not necessarily what we meant. What we meant was that you look at the signature and you look at how the person printed their name. And if you look at both of those things, if it meets the standard of 6203, that it appears like their name appears as it appears on the voter registration list, or their surname of registration, then you count that person's signature on the petition. And Judge Harold wrote a very nice dissent that I at least appreciated because I didn't really appreciate either. Didn't appreciate getting the first ruling and then getting reversed on the second ruling. And he, in essence, said, we basically reversed ourselves on Doe in less than 2 years. But their new standard is to validate a signature, you need to look at how the name appears, the printed part on the petition, and then you look at their signature. And then if it has all the components of 6203, then it counts. So let me give you an example. So my voter registration is Kevin Bach Karpinski or Kevin B. Karpinski. I could go ahead and put Kevin, I could print Kevin Karpinski, and I could put Kevin B. Karpinski, and that would count. Or I could print Kevin B. Karpinski, and I could do the signature that you all have seen that's totally illegible and no one could possibly glean anything out of it. And that would still count because the printed version has all the components of 6203. Or if I maybe had better penmanship as a kid and the printed part is not filled out, but my signature is Kevin B. Karpinski, it would count. So a lot of time and a lot of effort has gone into this name standard issue. And it's complicated because not only is it complicated when you have someone who's just got a first name, a middle name, and a last name. We have many, fine residents in Montgomery County that have, multiple last names, multiple middle names. So it's complicated. We had a nice conversation today with the state board with Jared Demeritus and I say we, Sandy, Lolita, Boris, and myself, going through a variety of questions we had regarding the name standard and some other issues, because we were refining a presentation, a training thing that we're going to do for the staff tomorrow that are going to be processing the petition. So we want to make sure that they are comfortable with what's required to be a circulator, what a circulator has to do, what they have to sign, and what they have to do in terms of the petition format, and whether they have signed their name correctly and they've done everything that's required, including a date on the petition when they actually signed it. So with regard to a petition, you know, you have to print your name and sign it, or a combination thereof with all the information required under 6203. Your signature, though, can be entirely illegible. And I remember Judge Murphy, when we argued fire and rescue, saying to me, Mr. Karpinski, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the law is concerned, an X is a signature. And again, if you've seen my signature, it looks like a G. So it's not a whole lot different. It's just not a high bar in terms of verifying one's signature. So that's the standard under a petition. And I understand there's been discussion about X's with regard to signing the back of vote by mail ballots. And it has been the practice of the Board of Elections to accept an X, and those generally have been voters, quite frankly, that are elderly and their penmanship is not particularly good, and they leave an X. My basis for concluding that an X is a signature is because under Maryland law, it defines a signature. A signature means a tangible symbol or an electronic signature that evidences the signing of a record. And an X would be evidence of signing of a record, and it is a symbol, and thus would constitute a signature under Maryland law, and that's why those are counted for purposes of vote by mail ballots. We'd count them on a petition. The problem with the petition is that an X doesn't help you with all the other things you have to do to meet 6203 with regard to the name standard. And of course, it's obviously a little different when you're signing a petition. You're not signing it under oath. You're just signing your name that you support the petition that's at issue. Conversely, when you sign, obviously, your vote by mail ballot, you're attesting under oath that, you know, you meet the qualifications and you're only going to attempt to vote once and all the other things that are a part of the oath process. So that's sort of a general overview of the status of the petition, the name standard requirement for the petition, and the standard for signing other documents with regard to election materials.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Alex, then Daniel.
So Kevin, if your name as it appears on the voter registration list has your full middle name, are you saying that the signature can be valid if it's illegible, or if it just signs your first and last name with no middle name or just a middle initial in the signature?
So if I printed Kevin Karpinski and then I went ahead and signed it Kevin, and then there's a B in the middle of that, Karpinski, that meets the standard of 6203 and would be counted.
And even though your name, your full middle name is listed on the voter registration list.
Because it only requires the initial of any middle name. The problem, of course, is, and I'm being educated on this, we do have voters that have multiple middle names and multiple last names. And when you have multiple last names, you only have to have one of those surnames, which is your last name, but you then also have to have at least your initials for all of your initials for any middle names you have.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kevin, thank you first of all for clarifying that, because that's where I was going to go in terms of multiple last names, multiple middle names. For some of us, you may just know Daniel Koroma, but I have a bunch of names that are my African names that are within Daniel Koroma, right? And that appears on mine. So thank you for clarifying that. I want to come to the signatures, because I think that's where you made mention of an X is an acceptable form of signature. But to avoid ambiguity, because we just discussed that earlier, to make sure that everyone is clear, can you give us a universe of how many, voters, for example, that we usually have that sign their names with X, and what are some of those conditions?
I would say that the number is very small. The condition generally are nursing home voters that are to the point of being so frail that they have a hard time writing. And those are often part of state law requires every local board to have a nursing home program. And so we have people that go out to nursing homes, and that's generally where you see most of them. Otherwise, you just see what everyone criticizes my signature as just being totally illegible.
And that clarification is so important, because I don't, first of all, we don't want anyone having an idea that these are tons of votes, for example, right? But again, as I've said here before, that every vote counted. That's why I stand with the bipartisan, in terms of a message that went out from David and Army. I stand by that, because we want to make sure that there's no ambiguity. We want to make sure there's clarity when it comes to that. We board members are serving the public, that we know these issues. And if we don't know, we have an attorney that explains to us what these processes are. So in other words, you say very little. I know the numbers may be hard to come up with a specific number, but it's not a significant number whereby, and you've also told us the condition, which is these are usually nursing home programs, within the nursing home program, which means that some of these people are actually assisted as well, right?
Correct.
All right. So I don't know, Boris, you want to touch on what the nursing home program?
Yeah, just very briefly, maybe to add a bit more details. We do not track how many ballots were returned or applications with X on it. Just like we don't track how many people have illegible signatures like Mr. Krupinski. So the second thing is, I did try to speak to every team member about this issue, like to pick everyone's brain, our recollection. I would say that our conclusion is that we do not get more than a dozen, even if that much, of X's on the ballots in the last election. But I would also say that, to our best recollection, knowing that we don't track it, these do come up with the voter assistance form signed by someone who was assisting that particular voter, whether it's a part of the nursing home program, whether it's a part of the in-home assistance by the family member or someone else. So we do not dwell into reasons why someone cannot sign. Is it medical age or whatever? But understanding is number of X's is very small. As I said, a dozen, if even that. And those are accompanied with voter assistance forms signed by someone who is assisting voters to complete the forms.
Kevin, you wanted to add to that? You want to say anything? Or are you good?
I'm good. I agree with you.
All right. Well, thank you both of you for answering my questions.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I have a few things that I wanted to ask. Boris, when you said that it was about a dozen, is that just for mail-in ballots, or do we have people who sign with X's in person as well, or do we know?
what you mean? Like if they submit the application here in the office, if they
No,
would
what I,
submit,
no, no, no. What I mean is that when people go to the polls, they have to sign the VAC.
oh,
When they sign the VAC, sometimes, you know,
they do.
they're gonna have illegible, and some of them are gonna have X, and yeah, I assume, I don't know. I assume we're gonna accept it the same way in person as we do by mail, but I just wanted to get a sense if we have any idea as to what's happening.
I cannot speak to a number, but I can confirm when I served as election judge, we had people who just put X to move on and get their ballot to vote. And so it's people do sign in different fashion. Sometimes some people sign X's because they are unable to sign their full name, but sometimes people just put an X and move on. But I cannot speak about numbers of in-person signed VAX at the polling
Okay.
place.
So when you said about a dozen, we had 80,000 mail-in votes in the 2024 primary. So a dozen out of 80,000 is about 1.5 out of 10,000.
Roughly so.
Yes, which is, you know, point is, as I understand it, 0.00015, if I have that correct. It might be, I might have left out a zero, but whatever the case. Okay, so a very small, a very small number. Kevin, when you said that it's been the board's practice to accept this, how long, in your estimation, is that practice? Because I don't remember ever making a decision about it in my tenure on the board. I'm wondering whether whether a decision was made during your tenure.
Well, I don't know if it's practice. I think it's the law, and it's always, since I've been with the board since 2003, X's have always been accepted.
All right.
Because I think it's what the law requires.
And when you say it's what the law requires, is that a statute or is that an interpretation? Because it sounds like from what you described, it's an interpretation by the courts.
Well, it's both. I mean,
yeah.
Judge Murphy certainly told me that, but if you look at State Government Article 18201, it defines what a signature is.
Okay, so the definition you gave us is a statutory definition.
Correct.
And the interpretation of that statutory definition is that an X qualifies. Now, getting back to the middle name versus middle initial that I think both Alex and Daniel raised. If let me see if I understand the different permutations. If my middle name is in my voter registration, you need my middle name or middle initial to appear somewhere, either in the signature or in the printed name.
Correct.
If my signature and printed name does not include, if I just sign David Naiman and I don't have a middle initial and I don't have a middle name, and the voter registry has either a middle initial or a middle name, that is an invalid signature as far as the petitions are concerned.
Correct.
What about as far as voting is concerned?
It's nothing to do with voting.
Okay.
It's only specific to 6203 as it relates to signing a petition.
Okay, so if I go to the polls and I sign David Naiman, I can vote. But if, and obviously I'm not going to be signing a petition because board members are not allowed to sign petitions. But if I were allowed to sign a petition and I did not include my middle initial or my middle name, if the voter registry included my middle initial or middle name, then that would be an invalid signature.
Correct.
Now, what if my voter registration didn't include a middle name or a middle initial, and I then included it when I sign on the petition?
It would be accepted.
It would be accepted because I'm providing more information than what the voter registry has.
And that's, quite frankly, you know, if you're someone who is well trained in doing petitions, you always tell people to provide more information rather than less, because you can always provide more information that's going to be accepted. You can't provide less.
Okay. So, and people may not realize that when they sign to register to vote, I mean, I don't, you know, I registered to vote when I was 17. You weren't able to register at 16 when I registered. I don't remember what I did. You know, but whatever the case, it sounds like it pays to know what's on your voter registration if you want your signature to count when you sign a petition.
Or provide as much, even if you don't know, provide more than you would normally do. I never use my middle initial. So I'm a perfect example of someone, if someone didn't say, provide your full name, that would be, you know, I would just naturally not provide it because I don't use my middle name or my middle initial for anything.
Okay, so now let's say that I go to the Motor Vehicle Administration where they use my middle name. I'm already registered to vote, but they decide to send my information to the Board of Elections, which we know the Motor Vehicle Administration sometimes does. And can they change my voter registration from not including my middle name or my middle initial to including my middle name or my middle initial?
Boris?
So once you go to MVA, you part of the whatever process you are engaging there would be question whether you would like to reflect on your voter registration and provide any updates. What we get from MVA is literally what you provide on the form. When we restart sending monthly statistics, I think that on the last page, it indicates number of name changes. Every time you replace your middle initial with the full,
That's a name change.
it's a name change. Every time you remove middle initial, it's the name change. You get married, you change last name, it's a change. You just change your name from Boris to Stephen, it's still
right. No, that I get, but it's been a while since I've been to the Motor Vehicle Administration. What I do remember is the Motor Vehicle Administration telling my mother the last time that she got her driver's license renewed, which was a number of years ago. My mother's been registered to vote in Montgomery County since I was 1 year old, that she wasn't registered. Now, she may not have been registered with the same name as is on her driver's license. You know, she may have been registered with a middle initial, or she may not have matched completely. But what I'm trying to figure out is whether people are going to have their names changed with the Board of Elections without action on their part.
No. We do not change, we do not introduce changes to the voter record without signature on some document from the voter himself. So whether you go online and request it, whether you submit a paper application, you sign the provisional application on the provisional ballot, or you go to MVA.
Right, but at MVA, they take your signature for your driver's license and they apply it to the document that comes to us.
That's correct. But the document comes to us if you choose to update your voter registration. And then whatever you do after that, it's on you because you are updating as you go through the screen.
All right, so if somebody goes to MVA and updates their voter registration, they do have the possibility that they will change the way their name is listed on our voter registry, which could affect their petition signature. I mean, it sounds like, let's say hypothetically, if I didn't include my middle name, I went to MVA, they did, and I say, yes, update my information, they would be adding my middle name to my voter registration. I wouldn't be signing because they would use the signature that I use for my driver's license, but they asked me to do something to make that happen. They asked me to, now they ask us to push a button. Before your time, Boris, we had a situation where MVA was changing people's party affiliations without their knowledge, and that was highly controversial in both parties. No, there's a lot of people in both parties who do not want people messing with their party affiliations. But they're a step better than they used to be over at MVA, where they require the person there to do something. But it does sound like it's possible that the way they transfer information, they could end up transferring information. I mean, because quite frankly, I don't care whether you have my middle name or not, right? I don't use my middle name very often, but it's certainly on my driver's license. So it's entirely possible that that's how that happens to people, is that their middle name shows up because of MVA. That's all trying to get at.
It's I can just echo what Kevin said. I think it's for anyone who is engaged in collecting signatures for the petition. We don't know how the interaction goes, but providing more, it's better than providing less, especially in situations where we have, and Daniel would fully understand, people with multiple middle names or multiple last names. And because that's part of certain cultures that we have quite few residents in the county as well, right?
So Daniel can't do it because he's on the board, but all of his friends who have multiple names, you have to tell them that when you sign a petition, if you want to sign, put down all your names so that, you know, you've covered yourself. So,
Mr. President, I have actually a more bigger problem, but I'm not going to elaborate here because my dad lives with me. He's also Daniel Koroma, and my son is also Daniel
also
Koroma.
Daniel Koroma.
So we're not going to go into that today. So
okay.
Well, let's not.
Yes,
but there are multiple names in between Daniel Koroma.
Yes. We've had that come up in not with the Koroma family, but with other families on multiple occasions when fathers and sons or mothers and daughters had the same names, and it does get sometimes confusing for election officials. But thank you for reminding me of that additional issue for another day. Anyone else have questions for Kevin? Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Next is old business. We don't have anything on the agenda as old business. Does anybody have old business to bring up? Okay, after old business comes the website report, and we are back to Boris.
I apologize. As I said, trying to plug in the charger. My computer is about to die. I'll go over just very briefly. We continued with the practice of producing the website updates through the statistics. You will see the trend. As a few board meetings ago, I started introducing three months in each sheet. And if you look at the one for May, maybe it's the best, and number of page views indicates the interest that spikes in a run-up to election. I don't know how the numbers will look for the month of June, but I'm pretty sure we will go back down to some pre-election time. What in addition to the overall increased interest and visits to our website, there's something that caught my eye, is that the length of time on the website that voters spent was the lowest in May, as I believe our voters were going in, finding, you will see the top 10 visited sites. What is the wait time for the early voting? What are the locations? How do I request my ballot? What is the training materials? They will pick up the information they need, and they will go along. I believe that, in my view, that's indication of good service, that people can come in, spend limited amount of time there, find the information, and do what they need to do. So you see, in April, there was 93 seconds per visit. We went down to 60 seconds as we got in the month of May. Keep in mind, this is while its statistics are for the whole month of May, majority of these visits took place in the run-up to election day. We are talking about mid-May. So the traffic on our website in the first 2 weeks of May was phenomenal. That's how I would describe it, because I'm pretty sure it did more than a whole month of April itself. You will also see that just like in April, everything related to election workers, election judges dominated the top 10 pages visited on our website. In May, we went into early voting wait times, 42,000 visits, early voting centers, election dates, drop box locations. Those came to be prominent as we got closer to the election day. Going forward, whether we are in an election season or not, our intention is to keep producing these reports because, as I said, they give us a good dynamic, a good overview of interest of our voters. And I believe after the full election cycle, we might be able to maybe make our website more dynamic to provide more content on certain topics in certain months as per these statistics for the upcoming elections.
Okay, any questions for Boris about the website statistics? I do have one question, Boris.
Yes.
I thought it was interesting that numbers 9 and 10 for the month of April are the early voting center wait times and the early voting centers. And early voting didn't begin until May the 2nd. So it looks like we have voters who were looking to check on our wait times before early voting even started. That's really making a plan to vote, I suppose. But I was wondering if you have any insight. It's not just a few people, it's 3,000 people who went to the wait times location.
So here's the, the funny part is that the page itself was not fully functional as we were not in the early voting. But I think that we have to remind everyone that this year we sent our sample ballots earlier than previous years. And instructions how to seek this information was there. And I think this early dispatch of information in terms of sample ballots did generate some of the interest that we see today. So I have to go back to the very beginning of some of the presentations saying there is no silver bullet.
Okay.
It's just multiple activities that aim in the same result.
Okay.
And sample ballot, going out early, timely provided information added to this.
And I think it's great that we sent out the sample ballot earlier, because I think that a lot of times we want that to be out as, when people are voting. We may want to check the text there and make sure that whatever we say about the wait times, that we make clear that the wait time information will be available once early voting starts.
Yeah, and I cannot recall from the top of my head. I think we had this conversation earlier when in some odd month we had a huge number of voters checking out sample ballot on our website. Some of those visits are generated by the municipal elections that are taking place at the same time.
Yes.
So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Anything else on website? Okay, before we move to the next item on the agenda, I forgot to ask Kevin a question about the petitions. You mentioned a financial report that needs to be filed. Can you tell us what that is? And is that a public document?
Sure. It's called a petition fund report, and you file it online. It's much less, it's very similar to a candidate's filing that has to list all of their contributions they've gotten, all of their expenditures, all of their in-kind contributions. It has to provide all of that information. It's the one difference between that and a candidate's form is that there is no limit on the amount of money you can contribute to a petition. So you could be more than $6,000 and it's not a problem. So, but it in essence does the same thing. It lists all of their contributions, in kind, cash, otherwise, expenditures, and it is available on the State Board of Elections website.
So it's filed with the state like the candidate filings are filed with the state.
Exactly.
And it's available on the website like the candidates reports
Correct.
are available. Now the candidate reports are on like a schedule, right? Where, you have to submit a report at a certain time. You're saying that this is a requirement to be submitted when you submit the petitions?
Correct.
And do we know how soon it would be posted?
I don't know. When you file a petition, you're required to fill out an information page for a charter amendment, a petition fund report, how many pages you're submitting, and if you ask for an advance determination. Those things are all required.
Okay, thank you very much. Diane?
Really quick, I think. You said that there's no monetary limitation for donating, so would that indicate that names of contributors are not necessary? It's just the amounts?
I don't think that's what he said.
Unlike,
I think
Yeah,
it lists the contributors. It just does not confine the amount that a contributor can give.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize for going out of order there, but I had forgotten to ask that particular question. Okay, the outreach update, Dr. Zelaya. Has his hand up.
Jerry, can you promote?
Okay.
Here he is.
Good afternoon.
How are you, Dr. Z?
Good. So first and foremost, happy post Father's Day, all the fathers on the board and on the staff. So that's part of my report.
And our board,
but moving
and our
forward,
board attorney.
also our board attorney. So all the fathers involved at the Board of Elections, our volunteers, our poll workers, our future vote ambassadors and guardians. So many blessings to all. Moving forward with my report, summer outreach is in full swing. We're getting some invitations from our return customers. Also, this is an opportunity to encourage the public to send invitations our way as well. Once again, whether there's 5 people or 500, we always welcome the opportunity to engage the public. So by all means, reach out to the Board of Elections, and we're here to serve. We're working on multiple collaborative efforts with HHS, the public libraries, and many local churches around Montgomery County. We're also working on National Poll Worker Recruitment Day with the public libraries, which is on the 1st of August. We're also finalizing details for our Saturday service days, where we have staff going out to public libraries to meet our voters in their neighborhoods. Of course, Montgomery County, we're located in Upper Montgomery County, but we want to serve individuals where they live. And so we want to thank the public libraries for giving us an opportunity on Saturdays to have a prominent space where we could serve our individuals, whether they want to register to vote, if they have any questions, submit a mail-in ballot request, update their registration, or to become an election poll worker, or sign up their child in our Future Vote program. So we want to meet them halfway. National Vote, and the Saturday Service Day will start on the 7th of September through October 12th, which is the Saturday before the advanced voter registration deadline of October 15th. We're also looking at the details for National Voter Registration Day, which is on the 17th of September. So we have some big events, national events that we collaborate with the EAC, with the Election Assistance Commission. We're also confirmed the large events, early fall, late summer, Poolsville Day, which is September 21st, PanaFest, which is also on the 21st of September, Burtonsville Day, which is on the same day, September 21st, the Kentlands Oktoberfest, which is on the 13th of October, and the Tacoma Park Street Festival, which is October 6th. So we'll be coordinating those large events moving forward. But if there's any other events, by all means, bring them to my attention. We'll coordinate, apply, and add the appropriate resources to attend. Regarding our media committee, my intentions over the next 2 weeks to convene our media committee. I know we have a 70,000 injection in addition to what we have been allotted, one-time injection, as I call it, kind of caffeine espresso injection for the general elections. So we will put together a plan. I will present it to our committee, and then we will present it to the full board at the next meeting on the 15th of July. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much, Gilberto. Ami.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gilberto, what are you planning to do specifically at the Potomac Day?
Poolsville Day or Potomac Day?
No, Potomac.
Nothing. I could look into it. Do you have a contact or do you have a date?
I have a contact. I'll forward an email to you which discusses it, okay?
Perfect. I'll jump on it.
Because I think there ought to be something done there.
Okay.
I know from experience that when Dr. Z says he'll jump on it, he does mean that.
Yeah.
No,
I'm just pointing out an event that I hadn't heard anything about and was just wondering.
We have done Potomac Days in the past. I know and we haven't gone back since COVID. So send me the information. We'll jump back on it.
Super. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions for the outreach update from Dr. Zelaya?
Lastly, I want to give a shout out to Kina. I was at the East County Advisory Committee. We did kind of an engagement with the advisory committee. And so I also want to say thank you. She was there in support. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss that opportunity.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Kina, for that. Much appreciated. And Gilberto, thank you as always for our robust outreach program.
My pleasure.
Okay, we'll move on. Is there any new business? Okay, list of future action items from today's meeting. The one that I recall is the one that I just heard, that Ami is going to send Gilberto information about Potomac Day.
Already done.
Already done. All right. So we don't even have to put that on the list. Boris,
Right.
do you have anything that you think belongs on that list?
I did not write anything in the course of the meeting, so.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything from the course of this meeting that belongs on that list? I will say that there are some things that we discussed that need to be discussed in executive session that will be, but they don't necessarily go onto the future action items list. If no one has anything else, going once, going twice. Okay, we will go on to approval of the minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes. We have April 15th, May 14th, and May 25th. I believe I provided comments on all 3, and that Ami provided comments on 2 of my 3, if I remember that right. And I guess the chair will entertain a motion to approve the most edited version of all 3, I guess, is the way I would put that, unless anyone has any edits that they want to disagree with.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we accept that we approve all most edited versions of the 3 months.
Okay.
April, May 14th and May 25th.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved by Diane and seconded by Kina. All right. I'll just go down the roll. Daniel.
Aye.
Ami.
Aye.
Diane.
Aye.
Kina.
Aye.
And I vote aye. It is unanimous among the voting members. Thank you very much. I do want to make a point about our future meetings. You will note that our future meetings do not include the meeting in August. We are not having the meeting in August that we traditionally list as tentative and frequently cancel. It does appear that our staff will be either at the very end or be recovering from the petition process. If petitions are submitted on the last day that they are legally possible to be submitted, they will be due to finish on the day that would have been our board meeting in August. Given that we did not have any pressing agenda items for August, and I believe I reached out to the board members and it didn't seem like anyone else had any either, we're meeting July 15th and we're meeting on September 16th, but we are not meeting in August. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, then we will, before we stand adjourned, we're going to have a closed session. You were sent the information about how to link to that session by Kevin's assistant. So that's the email that you should be looking for. And the reason is approval of confidentiality requests, a personnel matter, and the security discussion that Diane requested today. Okay.
You should have been resent the link at 4:30.
I was not paying attention to that.
Okay.
I got it, so.
Yep, we were indeed. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to Brenda as well. So this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.